It's me, Mario!
Super Mario 64, a legend in its own right and a favourite amongst the speedrunning community. With Super Mario 3D All-Stars recently released, new gamers are being introduced to one of the first ever 3D platformers that got movement right. But upon revisiting this gem, the cracks are beginning to show.
This really doesn't look as good as I remember. I swear he didn't say that originally.
In 1996, Nintendo were lagging behind in the console wars. Sony had entered the market with the PlayStation and Sega had released the Sega Saturn. Less mentioned about that, the better. Both consoles would make huge leaps and bounds in pushing the standards of gaming into the realm of 3D, leaving the Super Nintendo behind in their wake. But in June of that year, Nintendo would release their next console, the Nintendo 64, showing Sony and Sega how to do 3D platformers properly. Most 3D games relied upon tank controls to move the playable character around. Some games really made excellent use of this control method, but it always felt clunky and cumbersome. Then the Nintendo 64 was released in Japan and blew the competition out of the water. A combination of the launch game Super Mario 64 and the weird controller. Yes, it was considered fucking weird even back then. You see, what made the controller revolutionary was the inclusion of an analog stick. This allowed the player to move around easily in a 3D environment and just wasn't the standard in controllers back then. The team behind Mario 64 put a lot of emphasis on Mario's movements, even to the point where they had refined his animations before levels were even created. And the first scenario where they tested the physics was chasing a golden rabbit named Mips, which would end up in the final game and be the most frustrating challenge in the game. This Speaking of controls, this is where I begin talking about the game's negatives. As a game that's over 20 years old, the mechanics have not aged gracefully. Problems arise as soon as you begin the game. Back in the day, it was an excellent basis for 3D platformers to work from and evolve the genre, but by today's standards, it feels very unresponsive and cumbersome. For example, the analog stick was created to introduce a level of subtle movement necessary for navigating these levels, but they are not complex enough to incorporate minor, subtle movements. For example, there will be plenty of times where you slightly move the analog stick and Mario will just turn in a semicircle. And if you are on a small platform, Mario will just walk off the edge, and it just feels incredibly unfair and infuriating.
It gets to the point where I don't even want to play the game anymore.
The controls definitely don't help when you make it to the later stages of the game. The level designs have far more emphasis on vertical progression and harsher consequences rather than exploring an entire stage freely with fairly low stakes, shifting the focus from exploration to sheer level of skill. With no suitable ramp in difficulty, it's easy and then it's just hard. If you fail at an earlier level, say Bob-omb Battlefield, the worst outcome will be is that you have to climb up the mountain and try again. But with later levels such as Tick-Tock Clock, if you fail, you get booted from the level and have to start all over again. This is, at the very least, very infuriating and time consuming. The perfect example would be the 100 coin star in Tick-Tock Clock. There were numerous times where I got 99 coins, all I had to do is get one more, and then I fell off the edge. Which creates an atmosphere that seems to work against the previous games, where the mechanics were simply run and jump. Now you have double jumps, triple jumps, wall jumps, backflips, dives, punches and kicks. Booting you out of the level isn't the worst thing in the world, but after each collected star, you have to re-enter the course so you can start the next star challenge, which really slows down the pace. For experienced players, it just comes across as a way to pad playtime. becoming tedious on repeat playthroughs, but for first-time players, there's so much to love. Forcing you to exit the level every time you collect a star presents the player with an opportunity to explore the castle and try new courses. The first time I played all the way back in August of 1997, I was so enthralled by the game and its variety that I would collect 1 star, then go immediately to another level. Exploration and variety was a huge factor in why I loved this game. But even if you prefer the clean sweep approach, where you get all the stars in a level before moving on to the next one, the level design subtly changes after you collect your first star. For example, after you collect the first star on Jolly Roger Bay, the sunken ship rises to the surface, meaning that the eel that resided in it is forced to find a new home, which later on you have to entice him out of to collect another star that hangs from his tail. The evolution of levels was incredible at the time, infusing new life into a level that could become stale and boring very quickly. With each level there are 7 stars to collect, 6 normal ones and 100 coin star, which can be the most collectathon style challenge in the entire game. In short, you have to collect 100 coins and then a star will appear. This can be a little bit of a tedious grind, but one star that I love is a star where you have to collect 8 red coins. I really like this challenge, as it forces you to explore the level from head to toe and become familiar with its layout. Knowing the courses is half the fun, but the game is always made problematic, unfun, and unnecessarily challenging by the one issue that permeates every enjoyable aspect of this game: the camera. With a lack of a second analog stick, with only 4 buttons to control the camera, they had to do what they could. But the camera is never exactly what you need. It's always just slightly off, non-precise, making basic challenges difficult to bad perspective. For example, walking along a plank shouldn't be very challenging, but with the camera being just off to the side, it makes it so hard to judge your trajectory, meaning Mario will fall off the edge and it just feels unfair.
For me, this was the first game I ever 100% completed. It showed the industry what could be done from the switch from 2D to 3D. But as time has gone on, it's really starting to show its age. Whether that be to sensitive controls or a lack of a modern camera system. I'm sorry to say, but it's an infuriating end to an almost perfect beginning.
But I think for any naysayers out there, there's always the DS remake. Bye bye.